Hello and welcome to section 6. This is solving NumPy problems. And in this first video, in this section, we'll cover arrays, two-dimensional matrix arrays to one-hot encoded matrices. So we'll start with just, reminding you that one-hot encoding keeps coming up throughout this course, and in general, when you are working with deep learning methods, this kind of encoding, you can pretty much see it all the time. And so far, we actually did some one-dimensional NumPy arrays. So we've got a flat arrays, just a normal lists pretty much. And the question here now is that, okay, so what if we apply the same techniques to working with two-dimensional NumPy arrays, matrices? And can we use the same functions for two-dimensional functions for one-dimensional arrays work the same as for two-dimensional? Well, before we answer these questions, one of the key questions here is that should I actually implement your own onecode encoder in NumPy, right? And the answer is no, especially when you're working with deep learning, because you don't want to reinvent the wheel pretty much. And in this case, I'll encourage you to use an already working and tested onecode encoder, because you don't have to start from scratch, because chances are you will get it wrong, especially at the beginning. But here is the catch, and NumPy doesn't actually have any ready-to-use onecode encoder, right? So this is a real problem. So you have to write your own, and we're getting back to the square one, and we don't have to, or we don't want to, especially at the beginning when you're working with deep learning. But if you're using CAS, you can actually use the two-categorical function to encode those two-dimensional matrices. And the only assumption that we have here is that you've already encoded your data as integers, right? So one-hot encoding works. Think about it as working on numbers only. And, in one of the videos in the course as well, we turned first the classes into unique numbers and then into one-hot, and then encode them as one-hot vectors. So we're assuming here that we don't have text, and those classes that are available are pretty much encoded as integers, and then we can turn them into one-hot encoded matrices. So let me give an example. Let's say that we have this two-dimensional matrix, and this is a simple array, two-dimensional array. So when we use two categorical, we pretty much just get the encoded binary vectors for each value. So we get a unique vector for each value that we've got in this array. And notice that two categorical really easily handle this case. And in previous cases where we were working with one-dimensional arrays, two categorical, works really well as well. So keep that in mind. You can, and this is a very general utility function, to be honest with you. And I highly encourage you to use it instead of just implementing your own one-hot encoder in NumPy. And if you want to check more resources about the subject, feel free to check out the following links, and I gather some common ways of actually implementing this one-hot encoder in NumPy. So if you really want to know how to do that, feel free to check out those links.